Hello there and a very good evening. Welcome to another edition of the People's Platform. You're joining us here today to discuss gender inequality, a topic that is quite pertinent to all of us living here in Sri Lanka as well as across the globe. Given, of course, the magnitude of this issue, today we are joined by a panel from not here just Sri Lanka but from across the globe. First, on my immediate left, we've got Venerable Janaka. He is from Myanmar. Thank you very much, Venerable Janaka, for joining us on this program today. We've also got with us Professor Sunitha Sharma. She is an associate professor and has a PhD in women's issues. Of course, much welcome views on women's issues would come from you, Professor. Thank you very much. Also joining us is Venerable Dao Thi Lan. She is from Vietnam. Thank you very much, Venerable Dao Thi Lan, for joining us on our program. So, jumping right into the issue at hand, gender inequality. This has been a discussion that has been going on for maybe even a few centuries, because as far as the early 19th century and even the late 18th century, there were discussions on gender inequality because primarily women were treated differently in society. Some of the basic fundamental rights that we so cherish today and enjoy today, and we take for granted today, of course, in certain instances, were not available to people at that time, to women at that time. It was only restricted to certain classes. So, Professor, first, just to give a precursor to our discussion, could you tell us how the discussion surrounding gender inequality has evolved throughout the centuries?
Gender equality and its existence can be traced to its antiquities. The issue has always been raised by women, particularly from the advent of the modern century, when on the one hand we hear about Rousseau and his theory of liberation, we have hardly heard about Mary Wollstonecraft, who stood for the vindication of the rights of women, particularly in the field of education, in order to provide them political and economic independence. The system continued, the thought continued with other thinkers of the time, feminist thinkers of the time, who gave their own perspective, their assertion on providing women the status of equality, which has been found missing, whether it is in the writings of Simone de Beauvoir or her other contemporaries, and later to it we find in the writings of Michael Foucault and Sigmund Freud how women should not be deprived of the equal status that is a rightful gain for women, and it should be a given and not something that one still needs to ask for.
Professor, so throughout the years, do you think that, women have been asking for equality, gender inequality, for quite some time. Do you think there is still more to be won?
Much more has been gained, much has been gained, and much more needs to be done in this direction. It is true that women have gained in the educational field. Their health has been a matter of concern with the government and the society. Employability remains an issue till date, as the title of breadwinner is still not given to women, and I would say that major political, economic, social rights like land property rights are being driven by some political forces, social forces which at times promote women to come forward and have property registered in their name. But more than that, what needs to be done, even after reaching a certain kind of a milestone, is that to form an understanding of the finer nuances and subtleties of the patriarchal structure which still believes in subordination and subversion, but it is in a very hidden form. So we need to understand the gestures, the policies that are directed towards this direction, where still men are made to enjoy a superior position and women are still relegated to a secondary position, I would say. So this whole distinction of primacy and domination, or rather dominant and dominated, still remains. We need to recognize this distinction in our everyday lives and move ahead, and this will be the new emerging phase of the women's struggles for justice for women, even termed as justice struggles for women. So we need to understand now the finer nuances that are attached to making the position of a woman quite subservient. And this is what now we are looking forward to, and equal opportunities and access to resources, opportunities towards having equal education, not that the boys are given preference for technical education and women have to be satisfied with simple graduation. So education in itself has to be on a footing of equality if we want to give women the status of equality in a truly ontological term of understanding.
Thank you very much, Professor. Moving on to Venerable Janaka. Now, when we look at even some of the largest religions in the world, there is some form of gender inequality. This could stem from the fact that these religions originated thousands and thousands of years ago, and the discussions regarding gender inequality that we're having now are quite substantially different from the situation and the discussions that were going on probably back then. So in addressing gender inequality amongst religious gatherings, religious institutions, how do you see that discussion going? Is there a discussion there, or is it still too much of a taboo topic to talk about?
Yes, because I'm also, come from the Buddhist background, so even the Buddhist religious background also we have challenges the equality among between man and woman. For example, like I must focus on my country issue, right? So rather than focus on the other countries' issue, right?
So the issues that are mostly prevalent in Myanmar.
Sure. So like in our country also there's discrimination against the women also very prevalent. And also, for example, like women are not allowed to some religious area because a woman are considered inferior, and also man is considered superior than a woman, like that. And also the one very hidden issues is a hot issue is like the bhikkhuni ordination. For example, like for us, we are very easy to be ordained, but for like a woman, to stay, we haven't have a legal actions or laws to the women to become a nun, bhikkhunis. So there's also the
discrimination is still ongoing there. Let's also speak to on the same subject with Venerable Dao Thi Lan from Vietnam. What has your experience been like in all of this, being a woman in as clergy, female clergy?
Yeah, thank you so much for your question, sir. So actually, what I'm going to talk is not focus on the religion, especially Buddhism. But I believe that like Venerable Janaka, so he discussed. But what I want to discuss here is about the woman inequality that you can see. Of course, what I want to say is about my country, and also it's that prevalent issue in the world, right? So as you mentioned from beginning, right? So it's common notion of a woman being as secondary earners and white men being as breadwinners, right? So for this kinds of problem also is the one of the main problem in my country when we talks about the gender equality. So this is referred to inequality. And also you can see like in my country currently, even in the modern time, but still in ethnic area, rural area, highland, they still keep the belief and tradition like they can get a marriage at the age of 14. So when you say it means when you talk about early marriage, you may think it's not related, but because of early marriage, so the role of woman, so it's lesser than men, and for their role we can see that role disparity, right? Like women, they just play the role as a household chores. That's another point we want to discuss. And of course many issues in my country when we talk about gender inequality, even we can see about the gap in the workplace, right? The payment. However, in my country now we just adopted national strategy on gender equality. It means for the 2021 to 2030 periods. Of course, if we relate a little bit to Buddhist community, especially as I'm Bhikkhuni here and Buddhist nun here, because I'm following Mahayana tradition, of course, for higher ordination, we don't have a big gap when we compare to higher ordination like Venerable Janaka mentioned. Because even when I say I'm Bhikkhuni, it means I could ordain as a Bhikkhuni. Why Myanmar, so Buddhist nuns, so they are not allowed to ordain as a high ordination, we call Bhikkhuni. So it doesn't mean that as a big discrimination in Buddhism. Because the Buddha's teaching, and at the Buddha time you can see we have Bhikkhuni, we have Bhikkhuni established as a Buddhist Sangha. So therefore, when we talk about this, I think it may be influenced by belief, tradition, custom from different countries. And we still understand that because of patriarchal society, we are influenced that. So that's a thing. And of course, I hope that we can approach different methods how to solve this issue. It means gender inequality. But like our professor also mentioned about education. It's really important. And of course here I also want to talk, of course, education is really important, but not from the school, not from the community, but should from our parents. It's really important because we need to, it means the children need to be trained from we should say from individual behavior and social behavior. So the things that we can reduce the gender issue or gender equality, because it's we will be stamped in our mind or absorbed our mind from very young age. So what I want to say, of course we have different approaches to solve the gender issue, but we highly recommend this. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Venerable Dao Thi Lan, for joining us from Vietnam. Also, Professor Sunita Sharma, a PhD in women's issues. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us. Venerable Janaka, thank you for joining us to discuss this topic of gender inequality. We will cross over to a short commercial break and bring you more with a few other guests that we have on our show today. Stay tuned. You're watching The People's Platform.
Generally, Sri Lankan people think one solution, one fix for all the problems under the sun.
What really is the role of a governor now?
Provincial council issues as well as local government issues.
What do you say about the strategy of encouraging private-public partnership?
Privatization is good, but within a certain profitable framework to the society.
There's a difference where the politician goes to the people, gets their problems solved, sorts them out.
At rugby, there's a defense line. Just because you can run fast, you don't run fast because that means that you are diluting
Right into the defense line.
You are diluting the strength of the defense line.
Newsline, weekdays at 8:30 p.m. on TV1.
So writing is often something quite solitary. It's something you do on your own.
How are you drawn to these areas and thematic areas?
Like often when I write, it starts with some sort of incident or some sort of thing that I want, something that I'm curious about.
Do you think that Sri Lankan writing in English has come of age or is coming of age?
Sri Lankan writing maybe is finally getting the attention that it's always deserved.
Children need to be taught the magic of reading.
The People's Platform, every Monday and Friday at 7:30 p.m. on TV1.
බින්දුවටම ප්‍රතික්ෂේප කරපු සමහර දේශපාලන ප්‍රවාහයන් ආයෙනවා කලාව නාව. ඒකෙත් කලාවක් තියෙනවා. ඒක කලාව. ඒ මොකක්ද? කොහොමද ඒක කියවන්නේ? තරුණයෝ ඉල්ලුවේ සිස්ටම් චේන්ජ් එක. ඒක උනේ නෑනේ. ඒක හදන්න මිනිස්සු ඉන්නව නැත්තේ නෑ.
IMF එකෙන් ණය ගත්ත හැකි. ඔව්. ආර්ථික කඩාවැටීම. මේ සංස්කෘතික කඩාවැටීම සිදු වුණාන් පස්සේ අපි කාගෙන්ද ණයට ගන්න කියන ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙනවා.
හරි කරගෙන කාට හරි ගෙයිමක් දීලා කීයක් හරි හොයාගෙන ඉන්න නම් පුරුෂාර්ථය හැදිලා තියෙන ජීවිතේ එතනින් එහාට යගේ හියුමන් ලයිෆ් එකේ ගමනක් නෑනේ.
මිනිස්සු ප්ලෑන් කරපු ජීවිත නැති වෙලානේ හැමෝටම තමන්ගේ ජීවිතය අහිමි.
ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදයේ දරිද්‍රතාවයක් කියනවා. Poverty of democracy.
බුද්ධිමය සංවාදය බ්‍රහස්පතින්දා රාත්‍රී 10:30 මාවත.
Welcome, you're watching The People's Platform. This is our discussion on gender inequality, and joining us here for the second half on my immediate left is Mr. Vijay Sharma. He is an Indian public servant. Thank you very much, Mr. Sharma, for joining us on our program. Also with us is Dr. Nithi Pandey. She is the principal of a law college in India. Thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us on our program. So let's start off with Dr. Pandey. Doctor, we initially discussed about gender inequality and, of course, from a bird's eye view, what should be done. Looking at the situation, of course, since you're coming from India, looking at the situation on the ground, Sri Lanka and India are very close neighbors. There are a lot of similarities. So as far as establishing gender equity or gender equality is concerned, what do you think can be practically done to achieve this feat? Because everybody says we need to do it, we need to do it, we should do it, but nobody speaks too much about how can we get it done.
Although we have lots of constitutional and legal provision in India to maintain gender equality, but I think all the laws were theoretically implemented, but if we are talking about practically, they were never ever implemented practically in strict manner. So when we talk about the right of education, although constitution has given that right, but most of the women are not aware about their rights and their laws which were made to protect them. Also, there is a set narrative of the society that women are of second kind of person. So we need to do aware people through education so that they can become aware. And if we also talk about the health issues, so if we are talking about family member, and if there is a female family member, she is not even able to take care of herself. She took her at last place, whether she is hungry or whether she is ill, but she didn't come forward and say that yes, I am hungry and I have to eat food first. So that kind of practice shows inequality in behavior.
And you're saying that there should be a change from the very smallest unit of society, which is family, and that change also needs to come from women themselves.
Definitely. Women need to educate themselves, women need to aware themselves, women need to raise their voice against every kind of adjustment they need to do just because they are female. So they need to raise their voice that we are also equal and we have equal rights on each and every platform.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pandey, for those insights. We now move our attention to Mr. Vijay Sharma, who's a public servant in India. Mrs. Sharma, you've been in the public service for quite a long time. You're retired now. How have things changed for women entering the public service in India? Because how a public service is run tells a lot about the situation in that country. So what do you think?
Oh, I would greatly agree with what Dr. Pandey had said, that the situation is very bad, was very bad, I would say, but it is fast changing. Like in my almost 40 years of career in public service, when we joined, there used to be so few women joining the service. Today it is it's greatly different. A lot of women are coming in public service. Of course, as she says, not at par with the women, still not, it's 50-50%, but the gap is being bridged very fast. And I would say that especially, I come from Bihar, which is made of mainly rural area. And in the urban areas, what I said, to a great extent, this gap has been bridged. And in rural areas, still, since because of several affirmative actions, scenario is changing, and it's changing very fast.
So, Mr. Sharma, do you think that the scenario in Southeastern Asia or our region or the rate of change in this bridging the gap, bridging the gender inequality, is as fast as it's taking place in the Western world?
I would say Western world took a very, very long time to reach this sort of equality, and still they are not equal. But we are progressing much faster than that.
What's the basis for your argument? Could you give me an example?
See, the basis is, one is involvement of women in several areas of, let's say, administration, education, professionals. A lot of women are coming and joining it. It's increasing very fast. And when it comes to, as I was earlier trying to point out, when you come to rural India, especially in India, I find that in local self-government, women in certain states have got a reservation, almost 50%. And when they started, it was something like they were guided by the menfolk, mainly their husband or their fathers, and they were actually participating in the administration in the name of their wives or daughters.
So the men were
yes,
de facto.
That situation has changed so fast in almost 4 or 5 years. Now it is women themselves, they feel empowered and they are taking the decisions now. So they have taken to it, and they are that way, I would say, at par with men.
So, even in Sri Lanka, there was legislation brought in to reserve not 50%, but 25% for female representation at local government bodies. However, we are yet to see real fruitful representation in that department. So, since you said that India has really done that, Dr. Pandey, do you think that's a good way to move forward? Like, does that really mean that the gap has been bridged? Because at the end of the day, you should look at living in a society where you don't need to tell the people, look here, 50% in this governing body should be women, and that is the reason why you have to appoint women. And not saying, well, this is your government body, you appoint who you want. If you want more women, then so be it. Don't you think that's a more ideal situation?
If I am talking about India, women are always superior place. As we call them Radha or Gauri or Parvati or Ma Saraswati, and we spend lots of money to build their temple. So women is very respectful in India. But when we are talking about bridge the gap, so government has taken lots of steps to bridge this gap by reservation or any other thing. But only reservation is not the way to bridge this gap, because we need to change our mindset first, because we need to saw women equal than men. So it is depend on us how we saw the women. If we are women equal than male, then only it will be changed. Otherwise this bridge cannot be meet out or eradicate by making laws or by making reservation policies or providing any other benefits. In the name of action, only formalities has been done practically. So we need to change our mindset first, and women need to come forward for achieving their rights or privileges, whatever government should provide them.
So, Mrs. Sharma, there are also some people who think, of course, that there is actually not much of a gender inequality to be bridged. It's not an issue that should gain so much of discussion, and that we are living in a world where both genders are equal. And now what women are demanding is to be preferred even more, or given an undue advantage over men. That is what they're fighting for now. Do you see any basis in this?
I do not think that, as you said, if some people feel that there should not be any push for women coming forward more and more, and there is not that gap, it's, I think, it's misleading. No, it's not true. Women do need some sort of affirmative action to bring them up, to bring them forward. Once they are there, then there is no stopping them. Like it is happening in most of the educational institutions in India, women are coming up, they are doing well. Now that way you cannot say that they are in any way inferior to any men, which used to be thought earlier. That thinking has changed now. Of course, still the gap is there, and therefore still there is need for affirmative action. I strongly feel that there is still need for affirmative action.
Now, Dr. Pandey, we look at affirmative action laws in the United States. The Supreme Court has ruled out some of these, saying that universities can't really allocate based on race or gender. There has to be equality across the board. So we've seen a lot of situations where, in at least the recent history, where Southeast Asian countries or South Asian countries usually follow the lead of what really happens in Western countries. Usually it happens there first, and then it happens here. So do you think that there will be a switch like that happening in our side of the world as well?
Most of the cases goes undetected or unreported due to lack awareness. So I don't think so. Nowadays women raise their voice in proper manner, so they can also reach justice and equality. And sir is also very good example. He came here just because her wife, so that she can present paper at international conference. So nowadays things are going change.
So that change will continue to take place.
Definitely, one day it will take equality. Definitely, one day it will take that level.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pandey, and also Mr. Vijay Sharma for joining us on this edition of the People's Platform. That's all we've got for today. Of course, we'll see you again, same time, same place, on a different day, of course. Until then, take care and God bless.